A widower, returning from a business trip, bought a doll on the highway. When his daughter took off the doll's dress, the father was astonished to see that. "Hello, Jennifer, how are you?" asked Christopher Wilson, meeting an elderly woman in a robe and apron, slightly dusted with flour, at the door of the neighboring apartment. "Hello, Chris, everything is fine. I decided to bake an apple pie. Come over with Monica a little later, I'll treat you," she kindly replied, noticing the little girl shyly hiding behind him. "I'd love to, but I have to leave for a trip in a few hours. Can you look after Monica while I'm away?" Christopher politely and delicately asked, fearing that she might refuse this time. "You know I always gladly will. My children have been living in another city for a long time and rarely visit me with their grandchildren, and Monica is almost like my own," the grandmother happily agreed, understanding Christopher's work and busyness as he had to raise his daughter alone. "Okay, thank you very much. Here's some money so that you and Monica don't need anything," he replied, handing the neighbor several bills. Despite the awkward situation, she did not refuse. Her pension was small, and it was hard to survive on it alone, not to mention any additional expenses, even if only for a few days. "Dad, will you buy me a toy?" the 5-year-old girl asked, looking into her father's eyes. "Of course, dear." Christopher replied with a smile, understanding that he could not refuse his sweet blue-eyed daughter with snow-white curls. "And come back soon," added Monica. "Don't worry. In 3 days I'll be back, and I promise we'll go to the amusement park right away," he said, kneeling next to his daughter and hugging her tightly. "Monica, will you help me with the pie while your dad packs for the trip?" Jennifer asked, understanding that Christopher needed some free time to pack and prepare for the trip. "Yes, with pleasure," the little girl answered joyfully, as she loved cooking with Grandma. She didn't know much, but she simply liked watching how simple ingredients turned into culinary masterpieces, amazing in their taste. "That's great. Now, kiss your dad and let's go to the kitchen," the woman added and, leaving the door to the apartment ajar, hurried to the oven. "Dad, I love you very much," Monica said, almost in tears, and, rushing into her father's arms, hugged him tightly around the neck. "I love you too, my princess. Behave well so I won't have to be embarrassed in front of Jennifer." "Agreed? I promise I'll buy you a toy for that," Christopher replied, motivating his daughter to be obedient. "Okay," the little girl answered, still holding her father in an embrace. Understanding that it was time for him to pack, Monica hurried after Jennifer, already hearing the pleasant aroma of ripe apples coming from the kitchen. Meanwhile, Christopher, knowing that his child was in reliable hands and there was nothing to worry about, hurried home. Packing everything necessary for the 3-day trip, he headed to the loading point. His partner was already there. Stepping outside, Christopher realized he had made a mistake in his choice of clothing, as the frost literally engulfed him, making him shiver from the cold. Looking at his watch, he understood there was no time to return home, so he got into the car and rushed to meet his partner. Christopher had been working as a truck driver for 10 years, but every departure was a small challenge for him. After his wife passed away, leaving home became even harder. But he managed to adapt to this, thanks to the attentive neighbor who loved children and was always ready to help and look after Monica. "Hello, how's it going? Everything okay?" Christopher asked his partner upon arriving at the loading base. "Hey. Yes, everything is according to plan. We're already loaded, so we'll be leaving soon. I checked the route, we should be able to manage in 3 days," Vincent Anderson replied. "What are we transporting this time?" "Household appliances. Mostly mobile phones, but there are also microwaves, a few refrigerators, and gas stoves." "Got it, great," Christopher replied and, throwing his things into the cab, went to the trailer with the cargo to inspect it before hitting the road. The next few days, the partners spent on the road. Knowing that their children were waiting for them at home, they decided to save as much time as possible by not stopping at hotels and sleeping in the truck. After delivering the goods, they set off back almost without rest, hoping to see their loved ones as soon as possible. In all this hustle, Christopher completely forgot about his promise to buy his daughter a toy, as he was focused only on getting home as quickly as possible. On the way, about 3 hours from their hometown, his phone rang. "Hi, Daddy, how are you?" asked the little girl, calling her father. "Hi, my darling. Vincent and I have finished and are on our way home. I hope to be back by the evening. How are you? Are you listening to Jennifer? I hope I won't have to be embarrassed in front of her." "No, I've been good. We cleaned up the whole day yesterday, and today we're making dinner. I helped with the pancakes and even washed the vegetables for the salad," the daughter replied proudly, knowing her dad would be thrilled with her eagerness and effort to act older than she really was. "You're my smart girl. So, my promises stand, and tomorrow we're going to the amusement park." "Wow, great. Did you already buy me a toy?" the daughter asked, reminding him of another promise. Christopher always brought her at least a small and inexpensive gift from each trip, which she kept in a special toy chest. "Yes, of course, I think you'll like this gift," Christopher lied, remembering that he had completely forgotten about the promise. After chatting a bit more and promising to arrive just in time for dinner, he realized that he needed to fix the situation as soon as possible to avoid looking foolish in his daughter's eyes and to avoid disappointing her. "Can you imagine, I promised to buy a toy and forgot about it," Christopher said to his partner in frustration, realizing it was already getting dark and it was unlikely he would find a gift on the highway. "Well, it's no big deal, it happens. We'll solve this issue," Vincent replied calmly. "How?" "By the time we get to the city, all the stores will be closed." "Yes, this is a disaster. Don't panic prematurely. In half an hour, we'll be passing a small village. I saw some shops and an open market there. I'm sure we'll find something suitable. I've bought toys there myself several times, and the kids were always happy," Vincent reassured his partner. A few minutes later, they indeed noticed a small village on their path, as Vincent had mentioned. It seemed like a tiny island of life in the middle of the highway. There were people, shops, and a small market. Stopping near some elderly women sitting by the roadside, Christopher hurried over to ask where he could buy a gift for his little daughter. "Hello, can you tell me where the toy store is?" he asked politely. "Hello, son. The store closed a couple of weeks ago. The owner moved to the city." "Oh, what am I going to do now?" Christopher muttered, realizing that he had no other chance to find a gift. "Carla Ellis deals with toys now. You can ask her. Maybe you'll find something." "And where can I find her?" "She didn't come out to sell today. She said she had a fever yesterday." "She's probably at home," one of the vendors chimed in. "Yes, exactly. Well, you'll have to go to her house then." "And where does she live?" Christopher asked, glancing at his watch. "On the next street, third house from the intersection. You'll recognize it right away. There's a fallen fence, and it's the only one like that," one of the elderly women explained where to find Carla. "Okay, thank you very much," replied the truck driver, and hurriedly returning to the truck, set off to find Carla's house. The neighboring street turned out to be quite narrow, so he had to leave the truck with his partner and go in search of the house on foot. After walking about 100 meters, Christopher noticed a faded and partially rusty fence lying on the snow-covered ground. Looking up a bit higher, he saw a small house with a roof made of old, hail-damaged slate, which reminded him of the eerie house on chicken legs from the fairy tales he read to his daughter at night. The appearance of the house did not inspire confidence, as it seemed that no one could possibly live there and the building itself had been abandoned for a long time. "Carla," Christopher called softly, knocking on the nearest window. "Who is it?" A minute later, an elderly woman asked, peering cautiously outside as she slightly opened the wooden door. "Hello. I'm very sorry to bother you. I was told that you sell toys and that I could buy a gift for my daughter from you. Come back tomorrow. I'm not working today," the elderly hostess, who clearly wasn't feeling well, replied with a cough. "I'm sorry, but I'm just passing through. I'm returning from a business trip and promised my daughter Monica to bring her a gift." Please, I can't go home empty-handed. She'll cry, Christopher pleaded, asking her to spare a few minutes of her time. All right, come in, she said, opening the door wide. Christopher hurried inside and paused for a moment, feeling even more frightened. The house seemed gloomy from the outside, but inside it was even worse. The walls were barely covered with torn and slightly yellowed wallpaper, and the old, partially rotten floor had bowls and buckets to catch the melting water dripping through the gaps in the roof. Carla herself didn't look much better than her home. Visually, she seemed a little over 60, but her tattered woolen shawl and gray hair made her appear like an elderly grandmother. Choose, this is all I have right now, she added, pointing to a few handmade dolls sitting on the edge of the couch. Examining each one, Christopher was amazed at the talent of this village woman. Despite the depressing atmosphere, the toys were bright, colorful, and cheerful. Each one seemed alive, with beautiful eyes and a cute face resembling a child's. Carefully looking at all the options, Christopher immediately noticed one doll. A small blue-eyed doll with blonde hair, sitting in a pink dress with white lace, reminded him of his own daughter. This one, very beautiful, Christopher said, pointing to the doll in the pink dress. Take it, the hostess replied calmly, naming the price of the toy. After receiving the money, she showed her guest to the door and suggested he come again if his daughter liked the gift. Thank you very much again, and get well soon. Christopher added as he said goodbye and, realizing he was a bit behind schedule, hurried back to the truck. Well, I see you managed to find one, Vincent noted, seeing the toy in his companion's hands. Yes, look at this beauty. Christopher replied proudly. I think Monica will like her. They even look a bit alike, Vincent said, confirming Christopher's first impression. Understanding that time was running out and they were falling behind schedule, Christopher stepped on the gas, barely staying within the speed limits. Arriving in the city just in time, he realized there wasn't enough time to park and unload the truck, which was full of construction materials this time, so he suggested postponing it until tomorrow. Dropping his partner off at home, Christopher headed to the neighbor's house, eager to see and hug his daughter. Hello, this is for you, Christopher said, handing Jennifer Myers a cake he had bought from a nearby shop. Hi, Chris. Thank you, come in, we've been waiting for you. Wash your hands and come to the kitchen, the neighbor replied and, while he went to the bathroom, hurried to the girl to cut the treat. Hi, Dad. Monica shouted joyfully when she saw her father in the kitchen. Jumping up from the table, she ran to him and literally leaped into his arms, hugging him tightly. Hi, my dear. Look what I have for you, Christopher said, bringing out a doll from behind his back. Wow, she's so beautiful, just like me. Monica said, taking the gift in her hands. Carefully examining it, the girl was impressed with how much the toy resembled her, both in eye color and hair color. Do you like it? Did Daddy pick a good gift? Jennifer asked. Yes, very much. It's the best gift ever. Monica replied, her eyes sparkling with happiness. Throughout dinner, she didn't let go of the doll for a moment, playing with it and carefully examining the gift. Monica almost forgot to eat. Only her father and Jennifer managed to remind her about dinner and the pancakes she had made with the neighbor. After a little snack, Monica jumped off the chair and ran to her room to play with the doll and introduce her to the other toys, which often stayed at the neighbor's house so that she had something to play with both at home and there. She is wonderful, Jennifer remarked as soon as Monica ran off. Yes, she's my only hope for the future, my only reason to smile and keep going, Christopher sighed. You should find yourself a good wife, and the girl could use a mother. You're still young, and a handsome man at that. Maybe you should look for someone, the neighbor suggested, knowing that Christopher was only 35 and had his whole life ahead of him. No, I'm not ready for that. I don't want to get into a relationship knowing I can't fully commit. I live only for Monica. She's the meaning of my life. I doubt I could get used to someone else or let anyone into my heart. Especially since Brenda still lives there. You can't find another like her, Christopher replied, struggling to hold back a tear. After staying a little longer, father and daughter returned home. Soon, Christopher tried to put Monica to bed and read her a bedtime story. The little girl, still holding the doll tightly, hugged it and soon fell asleep. Gently closing the door to his daughter's bedroom, Christopher went to the kitchen for a cup of coffee. Reflecting on his decisions and thinking about Brenda, he opened the window slightly to smoke. His memories were varied, from the most tender and pleasant to the most painful. It seemed like it all happened just yesterday. Christopher still remembered their first meeting and his introduction to Brenda, every detail of the day that changed his life. Just over 12 years ago, Christopher, a young guy fresh out of vocational school, couldn't find a job. His mother, who worked as a cook in an orphanage cafeteria at the time, talked to the manager to get him a job as an electrician. On his first day at work, Christopher was very nervous and, arriving at the orphanage early in the morning, went straight to meet the manager. She gave him his first assignment and directed him to the main building where several outlets needed fixing. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you," Christopher said apologetically, knocking over a young blonde woman who almost fell to the floor from the sudden collision. "It's okay, no problem." "Are you fixing something here?" she asked, smiling at him. "Yes, they said the outlets aren't working." "I'm trying to figure it out," Christopher replied, blushing, while carefully examining the charming stranger in a light blue dress and blue shoes. Her outfit perfectly matched her sky blue eyes, and he fell for her like a schoolboy. "I see. Well, I won't bother you then. Would you like some tea?" "I can ask for some from the kitchen," she kindly offered. "Yes, that would be very nice," Christopher answered. The beauty, a bit shy under his gaze, ran off and returned a few minutes later with a cup of hot tea. When Christopher took it, his hands trembled. It felt as if he was feverish, but he realized it was from the overwhelming emotions he felt for this adorable and sweet girl. "Forgive my boldness, but I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Christopher." "And you are?" "Brenda," she replied, lowering her eyes, blushing even more. "Brenda, you're very beautiful." "I've never met a girl like you," Christopher managed to say, his voice full of admiration. "Thank you, that's very nice of you," she replied, feeling her cheeks blush even more from the shyness that was consuming her from within. They stood there for a few minutes without saying a word. It was just pleasant for them to be in each other's company, and words seemed unnecessary. A few days later, Christopher found himself back at the orphanage and got to know Brenda better. As she approached adulthood, she was preparing for her graduation, and understanding this, Christopher invited her to the ball. Brenda, feeling very shy, did not refuse, as she had realized during their 2 meetings that their feelings were mutual. A few meetings changed their lives forever. After Brenda left the orphanage and celebrated her coming of age, the couple started dating. 2 years later, they formalized their relationship by becoming husband and wife. It seemed like they were on cloud 9, each ready to spend their entire life with the other. These warm and pleasant memories pierced Christopher's mind. Thinking only of his late wife, he didn't notice the passing hours. Realizing it was already quite late, he hurried to bed. On his way, Christopher peeked into the nursery to make sure his little girl was asleep. Struggling to hold back tears, he sympathetically looked at Monica, knowing she had to live without her mother. The event that happened 2 years ago was painful for both him and his daughter. Brenda was still very young, but one unfortunate accident changed everything. The next morning, Christopher woke up a bit earlier than usual. After taking a shower and having breakfast, he woke his daughter and informed her that he would be away for a few hours to deal with the cargo and meet Vincent at work. Letting Jennifer know and asking her to look after Monica, Christopher hurried to his appointment. "So, how did everything go yesterday?" "Was Monica happy?" his colleague asked while the loaders were unloading the goods. "Yes, she was very happy. I didn't think that toy would please her so much," Christopher replied enthusiastically. "See, I told you, that village is a good place. I've bought toys for my kids there too, and they were always happy." "Yeah, thanks. You really helped me out." If it weren't for that woman with her handmade dolls, I don't know how I would have gone home and looked Monica in the eyes. She always expects a little gift from me. I understand. The important thing is you made her happy. Now you can sleep with a clear conscience, Vincent replied with a smile. Yeah, that's true. But you know, I'm so tired of these constant business trips. My daughter hardly sees me, and I take little part in her upbringing. Over these years, Jennifer has probably become closer to her than I am. Don't be silly. Even though she's young, she knows and understands that money doesn't grow on trees. You're doing everything possible to give her the best, so Monica has no reason to be angry or resentful towards you. You're right. She's a smart girl, but I still feel guilty, Christopher replied, looking a bit sad. The salary justifies these sacrifices, so you have to accept it. You're doing it for her, providing everything she needs, and doing it alone is not easy. I know. But I really miss the old life. Jennifer is not Monica's real grandmother, she's just a neighbor. She can't replace her family. But you have no other choice. Unfortunately, your parents are gone, and so is Brenda. And where her parents are is a mystery, Vincent replied, trying to support his friend, understanding that his wife had come from an orphanage and there were no records of her relatives. Yeah, I'd like to find them, but it's impossible. Brenda tried to look for her mother once, but nothing came of it. Yeah, it's tough, really tough. Anyway, let's not dwell on the sad stuff. I remember that we have another business trip in a week, and it makes me feel even worse. Okay, let's move on. How about you come over for dinner tonight? My wife will cook something delicious, Vincent suggested, inviting his friend over. No, we have other plans for tonight. I promised my daughter a trip to the amusement park, so I need to keep my word. I see. Well, have a great evening. If your plans change, give me a call. You know my wife is always happy to see you. All right, agreed, Christopher replied and got back to work. Finishing his tasks a bit earlier than usual, he hurried home. To his disappointment, Monica had developed a fever, and not wanting to risk her health, they had to postpone the promised outing for a few days. While Jennifer stayed to look after his daughter, Christopher rushed to the pharmacy and bought everything that could help, from medicinal tea to cough drops and antibiotics. Dad, are we going for a walk today? I feel much better now, Monica said a few days later, feeling that her illness was subsiding. We'll check your temperature, and if everything's fine, then we'll go, her father replied, wanting to make sure she was fully recovered. Realizing that Monica was better and needed some fresh air, Christopher nodded approvingly, allowing his little girl to get ready for the walk. Half an hour later, they went outside. Are you sure you're not cold? Christopher asked, adjusting Monica's hat. No, it's fine, she replied, not trying to hide the joyful smile that they would finally go to the park. Just 10 minutes after leaving the house, Monica's mood abruptly changed. She began to stop and tug on her father's hand, struggling to hold back tears welling in her eyes. What's wrong? Why are you crying? Christopher asked, noticing his daughter's reddened eyes and tears on her cheeks. We forgot Anna at home. We need to go back, Monica said. Anna? Which Anna? Her father asked with a puzzled expression, trying to understand who she was talking about. Well, the doll you gave me. I don't want to go to the park without her, the girl replied, explaining her sudden change in mood. Well, if we need to go back, let's go, so Anna doesn't feel left out, Christopher smiled, pleased with his daughter's attachment to his recent gift. Back home, without even taking off her shoes, the little girl ran to the kitchen and grabbed the doll sitting on the windowsill near her chair. Realizing the problem was solved, they headed to the park where they had a great time. The playground rides lifted Monica's spirits, and having the doll in her arms only added to her joy. Good evening, Chris. How's Monica doing? Better, asked caring Jennifer, popping in for a visit. Hello. Yes, she seems much better. We even went to the park today, Christopher replied. That's wonderful. I brought Monica some cherry jam for tea, to boost her immune system, so to speak, the neighbor kindly offered, revealing a gift from behind her back. Great. Come on in, have a seat. Let's have tea together, Christopher invited, leading her to the kitchen. No, I can't. My favorite show is starting now, I don't want to miss it. I understand, the show is sacred, Christopher replied with a smile, grabbing the jar and hurrying to the kitchen. Monica, would you like some tea with cherry jam from Jennifer? I'm coming, the little girl joyfully shouted and, clutching her doll, dashed towards her father. 5 minutes and everything will be ready, he replied, setting the kettle on. Okay, Monica said, not taking her eyes off Anna. Stay here, I'll be right back, her father cautioned, stepping away for a couple of minutes to another room. Returning, Christopher was horrified to see that his daughter had accidentally knocked over the jam jar, splattering the table, floor, and her beloved toy. Dad, look what happened to my doll, Monica said, showing him Anna, whose pink and white dress was now a dark cherry color. It's okay, sweetheart. We'll clean everything up, and we can wash the dress, her father reassured soothingly, understanding that Monica was on the verge of tears. Will you help me wash it? She asked, looking hopefully into her father's eyes. Of course, let's go. I'll get everything ready, Christopher replied, heading to the bathroom first to fill a bowl with warm water, prepare detergent and soap. Can you handle this, or do you need help? No, I want to do it myself, she confidently replied. All right, I'll tidy up the kitchen then come back to you. Hurriedly, Christopher wiped down the messy table and carefully cleaned the floor to remove the sweet jam. Hearing his daughter splashing water in the bowl, he felt joy and pride knowing that his daughter, though young, was already independent and capable. 10 minutes later, Christopher returned to the bathroom where Monica was washing the doll's dress. He almost gasped at what he saw on the back of the dress. Beside a beautifully embroidered 4-leaf clover were the large letters V and C. He scrutinized them closely, almost stunned, unaware of the passing time or what was happening around him. Dad, what's wrong? Monica asked, bringing him back to reality. Oh, nothing, everything's fine. So, did everything wash out? Christopher asked, taking the handmade dress in his hands and rinsing it once more in soapy water. After finishing the wash, he helped his daughter hang it on a clothesline in the bathroom. There, it'll be dry and clean by tomorrow morning, he assured Monica. Thank you, Dad, she replied gratefully, giving him a tight hug. With her doll in hand, the little girl ran off to her bedroom to play with it a bit more before bedtime. Later, Christopher joined his daughter, tucked her into bed, and as usual, read her a bedtime story. Once she was asleep, Christopher quietly left her room and went to his own. Opening a drawer in which his late wife's belongings were kept, he retrieved a small piece of fabric and headed to the bathroom. This can't be. Christopher muttered in shock, holding the piece of fabric against the doll's dress and noticing that the patterns and initials on them were identical. In that moment, he froze, unable to comprehend how this could be possible. Thousands of thoughts raced through his mind, hundreds of theories and explanations trying to logically make sense of it all. Feeling he couldn't sleep without finding an explanation, Christopher went to the kitchen to make himself a strong cup of coffee. As he carefully examined the piece of fabric in his hands, he remembered the first time he had seen it. Brenda, what's this piece of cloth? He had asked, noticing the fabric scrap in the drawer while looking for his jeans. No, silly, that's the most precious thing I have, she exclaimed, entering the bedroom and seeing what he was inquiring about. Rushing over to him, she snatched the fabric from Christopher's hands and briefly closed her eyes, holding it close to her. Maybe you'll tell me why it means so much to you, he asked, not hiding his curiosity as he sat on the edge of the bed. You know I grew up in an orphanage, not knowing who my parents were. Yes, of course. So, the orphanage staff found me on their doorstep wrapped in a pink blanket, and this piece of fabric is the only reminder of my past and how I came into this world. Perhaps someday, this very scrap will help me find my birth family. Look, there are initials here, maybe they belong to my mother, Brenda said with emotion in her voice, pointing to the two large letters V and C. Would you really want that? After all, they abandoned you when you were just a baby. I don't see the point in seeking out people who didn't want you. Christopher responded negatively to Brenda's desire to find her parents, believing it to be futile. You may be right in some ways, but it's unfair to judge harshly without knowing what drove them to do such a thing. Perhaps they simply didn't love me, or maybe they felt they had to do it, thinking it would be better for me there. I'm not in a position to judge without knowing their reasons, and more than anything, I would like to meet them, Brenda replied, her voice trembling, on the verge of tears. For her, this was truly important. It was only now, after many years of marriage, that Christopher understood how deeply his wife wanted to find her birth parents. He remembered they had even tried, reaching out to various authorities, but they had never managed to find any leads that would trace Brenda back to her family. The next morning, entrusting Monica to their neighbor, Christopher headed to the cemetery to visit his late wife's grave. Finding himself in this somber place that exuded a heavy atmosphere, he sat down on a bench. His wife couldn't be brought back, and time couldn't be rewound. Just one moment. One extra step at a crosswalk at the wrong time, and Brenda's life had been cut short. Christopher still felt a sense of guilt. He could have arrived sooner. He could have picked her up from work and taken her home, but alas, he hadn't. I think I've found something that could reveal your past and shed light on the mystery of your birth, Christopher murmured, looking again at the grave of his late wife. Fingering the piece of fabric, he continuously scrutinized the initials and the four-leaf clover, caressing them with his fingers. It seemed impossible, unbelievable, but he firmly understood that such coincidences don't happen. The fabric was too similar, and the pattern with the image was identical. It felt like someone was leaving their mark, a stamp that couldn't be mistaken or forged. I don't know what to do. Should I even try to trace your past? Christopher began to doubt aloud, realizing Brenda was gone forever. He didn't know if he should try to find the grandmother who sold him the doll. Should he talk to her about all this and inquire about where the fabric for the doll's dress came from? Maybe she acquired it by chance, he continued to ponder, understanding he might scare the old lady, who knew nothing about Brenda or the symbols hidden on the back of the dress. After spending over an hour at the cemetery, Christopher found himself asking it another question, trying to understand if he should take any action in this situation. Brenda always supported him and, despite her lack of formal education, could provide very astute, wise, practical advice. Now that she was no longer there, Christopher struggled to make any decisions. He wanted to understand the potential consequences and whether it was worth doing anything at all. Realizing he needed to talk it out and discuss this situation with someone, Christopher headed home. Vincent was unlikely to grasp the full complexity, so he decided to talk to Jennifer, who was older and much wiser than him. "Could we talk in private?" Christopher asked, hoping that his neighbor could help him navigate the difficult situation he found himself in. "Yes, of course. Is something wrong?" "You look pale," Jennifer noted, seeing the pale man before her struggling to gather his words. "Here, look. Do you think these are identical?" he began, showing the doll's dress and the scrap of fabric from his late wife's dresser drawer. "Yes, they're very similar. Especially the pattern and the initials. It seems like the work of the same craftsman," Jennifer confirmed Christopher's assumption. "That's what I think too. This piece of fabric is the remaining part of Brenda's swaddle, the one she was found in on the doorstep of the orphanage, and this is the dress of the doll I bought Monica on the highway. Are you saying this shopkeeper has some connection to your wife?" "I don't know. I wanted to ask for your advice on what to do next. Maybe she could help find Brenda's mother, whom she never saw. Or maybe it's just a coincidence and the fabric ended up with her by chance. I don't understand what to think or how to proceed right now," Christopher replied, feeling lost. "Oh, Chris, this is all so complicated. I don't know if there's a connection or not, but I'm sure the patterns are identical. It shows the hand of the craftsman, clearly marked with their initials like a signature. It's not my place to say, But I think you need to get to the bottom of this to find out the truth once and for all, Jennifer advised, urging him not to torment himself with guesses, but to uncover everything and learn the truth. Yes, perhaps you're right. I'll drive myself crazy if I don't understand whether this woman has any relation to Brenda. What's her name again? Do you remember? Jennifer asked. I think it's Carla Ellis. Something like that, Christopher answered uncertainly. Well, the name could match, his neighbor replied, pointing out the large letter C on both the fabric and the doll's dress. Christopher nodded, deepening his thoughts even further. Contemplating the correctness of his decision, he firmly understood that he wanted to find Carla and ask her personally whether she had any connection to Brenda, who was abandoned on the doorstep of the orphanage shortly after birth. You should go tomorrow. Rest today, calm down, think everything through thoroughly again, advised the neighbor. She also suggested that Christopher leave a spare key to his apartment so she could watch over Monica in his absence. Agreeing immediately, he handed over the duplicate key and took Monica for a walk in the park. Trying to spend more time with Monica, he couldn't shake off the complex situation from his mind, with too many uncertainties. In the evening, after putting Monica to bed, Christopher tried to go to sleep early, but his thoughts kept him awake until nearly midnight. I'm heading out. I hope I can shed some light on this situation and figure everything out, Christopher said anxiously to his neighbor the next morning, preparing to go to the village where he bought the doll. All right. Good luck to you. I hope everything works out, Jennifer supported him and crossed her fingers before letting him go. Realizing he had no one else to talk to about all this, Christopher got into his car and headed to the village. After a few hours, familiar semi-empty streets and old houses surrounded him. Remembering where Carla lived, he immediately went to her house. Standing under the windows, he called out to the owner in hopes that she would answer, but there was no response. Peeking carefully inside through a partially open curtain of one of the windows, Christopher saw that the place was empty. She's probably still at the market, he thought, wasting no time, and went to the other grandmothers selling along the highway. Hello, can you tell me where to find Carla Ellis? Christopher asked several familiar vendors who were selling pastries and other homemade goods. Hello. She's sitting a bit further down today. You'll notice her as you drive along the road, one of them answered, pointing in the direction. Thanking her for the help, Christopher set off and within a few minutes, indeed spotted Carla and pulled up beside her. Good day. Do you remember me? I bought a handmade doll from you, dressed in a light pink gown with lace, Christopher began. Hello, yes, I remember. Is something wrong? Carla asked, sensing that he wouldn't have come unless there was an issue concerning the toy. No, everything with that is fine. My daughter adored it, but I need to speak with you privately. Is that possible? Christopher asked, glancing around and noticing too many people nearby who shouldn't overhear their private conversation. What do you want to talk about? The grandmother asked slightly apprehensively, not understanding what this conversation could be about and not fully trusting the unfamiliar man. I'd like to inquire about something, he replied, pulling out from his pocket a scrap of pink fabric with a 4-leaf clover and 2 large initials. Can you give me a ride? Carla asked in a trembling voice, recognizing exactly what the customer held in his hand. She nearly cried, but managed to restrain herself, not wanting to draw attention to herself from those around. Christopher nodded approvingly and helped her gather her things. On the way to her home, the woman trembled with excitement, as if wanting to speak out, but holding back until they were behind closed doors. Come in, have a seat, she said, waving towards the kitchen, tossing her things and toys onto the couch. Carla returned to him and sat down next to him. So, are you going to tell me something? Christopher asked again, placing the piece of pink fabric on the table. Where did you get this? Who gave it to you? Carla asked with difficulty, holding the piece of swaddling cloth tightly against herself, trying to hold back tears. This fabric belonged to my wife Brenda. She grew up in an orphanage, and that's where we first met, started dating, and eventually got married. This scrap is part of what she was wrapped in when she was left on the doorstep of the orphanage 30 years ago. She was abandoned by fate, but the matron cared for her as if she were her own daughter. Brenda became the heart of the community. She had many friends, and then we met and fell in love at first sight, Christopher began to explain, seeing the change in Carla's expression as she listened intently to every word. You have children, I assume? Carla asked, making the assumption based on Christopher's previous purchases from her. Yes, Monica, she's almost 6. She adores your doll. From day one, Anna, that's what she named her, became her favorite toy, Christopher replied. Then why did you come alone? Doesn't Brenda want to see me? Carla asked, wiping away tears, understanding that her daughter might not forgive her for abandoning her on the doorstep of the orphanage. Unfortunately, that's physically impossible. A few years ago, there was a tragic accident, and Brenda is no longer with us. I'm raising our daughter alone, but Monica doesn't need to know about our conversation. She's still too young for all of this, Christopher said sadly. Hearing that her daughter was no longer alive, Carla couldn't hold back and burst into tears. She couldn't contain her emotions anymore, and the pain of what she heard didn't allow her to say a word. Seeing how genuinely upset she was, Christopher tried to calm her down and helped her find comfort so that Carla could regain her composure. I'm such a fool. I've hated myself all my life for what I did, she murmured, wiping tears away. Maybe you could tell me about it? Christopher asked, wanting to make sure he understood correctly that the woman sitting in front of him was Brenda's mother. I spent most of my life in this village, but like any girl, I dreamed of life in a big city. After school, I managed to escape this backwater and even completed sewing courses. That allowed me to get a job at the garment factory and rent a room in a nearby dormitory. Gradually, I got used to city life, but something happened that changed everything for me. I met and got to know the driver at the same factory, and I fell in love with him. We started dating. Sometime later, I found out I was pregnant and told him about it. I thought he'd be happy, as he swore to love me forever. But after the news, he just ran away. I don't know where he is or if he's even alive. I haven't seen him since that day. It was too late to get rid of the baby, and I would never have been able to do that. I wanted to return home to the village, but I was afraid of what people would say. Honestly, I'm not even sure my parents would have let me through the door with a child. Soon after, I gave birth, but I had no money or means to provide for the girl, so I had to leave her at the orphanage. Several years later, I got married, and my William and I tried to find our daughter, but we had no luck. We never had children together, and after my husband passed away, I've been living alone for 15 years, Carla cried again, recounting the story of her difficult fate, during which she faced numerous trials and hardships. Well, I sympathize, Christopher said sincerely, to some extent understanding why she had to make such a decision. He felt she was telling the truth and genuinely remorseful about it all, so he couldn't be angry or wish anything bad upon her. At the same time, he felt incredibly uncomfortable being around her, knowing that in some way this person had betrayed Brenda by leaving her on the doorstep of the orphanage. Several hours later, Christopher returned to the city. As he sat behind the wheel of his car, he tried to replay the entire conversation with Carla in his head and rethink it all over again. Deciding that ultimately he had done the right thing, Christopher went up to the apartment, greeted Jennifer and his daughter. After playing with Monica for a bit, he left her in the living room to watch cartoons and distract herself while the adults talked. How did it go? Did you find her? Jennifer immediately asked, closing the door to the kitchen so Monica wouldn't overhear their conversation. Yes, I found her. And we talked about it, Christopher replied. So, she's Brenda's mother, or is it just a coincidence? She's actually her mother. Honestly, I half expected it, but I'm still unsure what to think and how to proceed. I don't understand what feelings I should have towards this person right now. Maybe I'm just angry. After all, it's because of her that Brenda spent her entire childhood in an orphanage and never knew a mother's love. On the other hand, there's frustration and disappointment, maybe even some sympathy, because her life hasn't been easy either, and now she's completely alone. Abandoned by everyone, you could say. I understand where you're coming from. But I think you need to approach her with kindness. At the end of the day, she's not a stranger. First and foremost, think about Monica. You two have no one else. You live together, just the two of you, and I think having a grandmother come into the picture could be a fortunate turn of events that shouldn't be avoided. Besides, if Brenda hadn't ended up in the orphanage, you two wouldn't have met. Yes, I'm still not sure if it's a good idea. We've gotten used to relying only on ourselves, and you're always here. But I won't be around forever. Besides, I'm just a neighbor, and she's Monica's blood relative. Don't be afraid, talk to Monica about it. She may be young, but she's a very smart girl. You need to discuss this with her. And listen to her opinion. If the little one is against it, then it's your decision, but if she wants to get to know her grandmother, don't stand in the way, Jennifer advised, understanding that one shouldn't dismiss family lightly to avoid spending life, including old age, in complete solitude. Do you really think it's appropriate? After all, she did this to Brenda, Christopher replied, uncertain if this advice would be helpful to him. Don't judge a person by one action. We all make mistakes. But that doesn't mean you have to pay for them your whole life. I think she has regretted her decision many times over, and if she could, she would change everything, replied Jennifer, insisting that he talk to his daughter. Okay, I hear you. I'll think about it, Christopher said. The next few days, Christopher spent in contemplation. It turned out that making a decision wasn't so simple. He needed to carefully analyze everything, weighing the pros and cons, nearly giving up sleep and replacing it with coffee and cigarettes. Christopher realized that he was truly acting in Monica's best interests. Monica, would you like to meet your grandmother? He asked his daughter, hoping to support her in any decision, even one that wasn't particularly pleasant for him. Do I have a grandmother? The girl asked, looking at her father. Yes. If you want and you're okay with it, we can visit her for the weekend. What do you think about that? I'm all for it. Monica answered joyfully and energetically. With her decision made, Christopher cleared his schedule for the weekend. On their way to the village, he and Monica stopped at the nearest supermarket to buy treats and sweets. A few hours later, Christopher slowed down near a fallen fence and noticed Carla digging in the garden nearby. As soon as Christopher and Monica got out of the car, she looked up and saw her guests. Carla froze for a moment, shocked by Christopher's unexpected visit to her doorstep. Realizing she had visitors, Carla started to rush around, trying to tidy up something around her house. Hello, I didn't expect you to come back after you left, slamming the door. I thought our last meeting was indeed our final goodbye, and I can understand why you might harbor resentment toward me. Please don't worry about that. I've thought it all through carefully and realized I can't treat you this way, in memory of Brenda and for Monica's future. Brenda never judged you, and she dreamed of finding her mother. She dreamed of meeting you, Christopher replied, politely explaining his decision and embracing the tearful woman. Meanwhile, Monica, clearly feeling shy around this stranger, hid behind her dad, cautiously glancing at Carla. Hello, Monica. My name is Carla, she said, trying to introduce herself to her granddaughter. Hello, Monica replied skeptically, keeping her distance. Would you like me to show you something? Carla asked with a smile, trying to pique Monica's interest. Yes, Monica agreed, noticing from her father's expression that he was completely okay with this and behaving calmly, trusting this stranger. Carla, determined to win Monica over, led the girl to the bedroom and showed her the toys neatly arranged on the bed. Can I play with all of them? Monica asked. It was clear from her sparkling eyes that she was delighted, and Carla couldn't refuse her even if she wanted to. Of course, take them all, they're yours, Carla replied with a smile. Yay! Monica exclaimed, leaping onto the bed and diving headfirst into the toys. Meanwhile, the grandmother, deciding not to interrupt Monica's enjoyment, returned to the kitchen where Christopher was waiting for her. Thank you for coming. It's very unexpected, but I'm happy, she said, struggling to contain her emotions, thanking him for the pleasant surprise. You're welcome. I understand how nerve-wracking and important this is for all of us. I've spent a lot of time pondering it and wasn't sure until the end, but one thing I know for sure is that it's important to me that my daughter is happy. I see that she's afraid and shy, but Monica has long dreamed of having a real grandmother. I think you can give her that. She needs love, attention, and a woman's care. I'm doing everything I can, but sometimes work takes up a lot of my time. Yes, I understand. I think Monica understands it too, knowing that Dad needs to earn money. I hope you're right. I don't know what to say, Christopher hesitated, sitting on the chair. And how do you feel about moving in with us and helping with Monica's upbringing? Our house is old, but we can renovate it and sell it, or we can come here for the whole summer so she can run around outdoors. What do you think? I don't even know what to say to you. I need to think, Carla replied after a momentary pause, shocked by Christopher's proposal and unsure of how to respond. At that moment, Monica peeked into the kitchen, approached her grandmother, and climbed into her arms, hugging her tightly around the neck. Grandma, I want you to live with us too, Monica said, having overheard most of the conversation. My dear family, Carla said, tearfully. I agree, she added, accepting her son-in-law and granddaughter's proposal. Soon, the three of them returned to the city together. If you enjoyed the story, please support it with a like and a comment. All the best to you.